is Crystal E. Ward, and I'm pleased to share this interview with Pastor Elvis McGoy, who's sharing some insights about his experience as a pastoral counselor dealing with issues of trauma and crisis. I know there's a lot you'll be able to learn from this interview that you'll be able to apply in your role as a pastoral counselor. Well, thank you, Pastor Elvis, for taking this time to meet with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, as I mentioned to you, I'm taking this course, Issues and Crises and Current Issues in Pastoral Counseling. And as part of my assignment was to meet with a pastoral counselor who has dealt with issues and trauma with individuals that they've counseled, and you immediately came to mind. So thank you for taking this time to meet with me. Yes. So what I wanted to ask you is, in your realm of pastoral counseling, what are the types of crises or traumas that you had to deal with or face in counseling individuals?
Thank you. So in my pastoral experience and the people we interact with, some of the things that you could tell from time to time caused trauma or crisis in families. Number one is death. And sometimes it even depends on the way the person passed away, whether it was sudden, a tragic death, or someone who was really young. You see families going through a crisis at that time. There are times also when I have been with families that they have been given a diagnosis, that terminal illness, they're just finding out. And in some occasions, it comes at the heels of many other crises in their family, so it seems to be like the final thing that just makes them feel they can break down. And then there are also times I have dealt with situations in family dynamics, either of infidelity or dealing with a sense of abuse, that those have also created a different crisis and trauma for people who are mourning it from time to time.
So that's quite a bit of different traumas that you have, a variety of traumas that you have dealt with and faced with. Like, what are your immediate reactions or actions when you're dealing with a person that has dealt with some form of trauma?
So I have valued to begin with finding a way to be present with them and recognizing that as I go to be with them, initially I will confess I used to struggle with what am I going to tell them, because you hear a tragic situation and you wonder what am I going to say. But I think over time, through training, taking our CPE classes and the experiences with that and how to deal with families in crisis, it was not as important of what I'm going to tell them as to be present and hear what they're willing to tell me. Because it's almost giving them space to express their pain. And sometimes it's expressing words, a lot of emotions come through. Sometimes they're very angry. And being there as a pastor, sometimes don't be surprised if I get to be an object of that anger sometimes. Questions of, how could God allow something like this to happen? So there is a sense of just being present. And then there's some who may process it in silence and being willing to just accompany them through that space and be open that when they are able to open up, just give them that catharsis moment to just let it out. And then from there, out of what they say, we can get to see where they are so that we can see how to keep on moving forward together.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'm thinking, with those variety of crises and traumas that you faced, what would you say have been some of the biggest challenges that you've seen in dealing with the individuals as they're going through this trauma and you trying to help them?
So I will say number one is because no case is necessarily the same. Sometimes the unpredictable nature of how people will respond can become a challenge, and sometimes you may not know how long this journey might be, and maybe if there are places or times that you may say at this point it may be value to refer this person to another counselor to be able to work with them, just based on managing how best I can do for them, and then additional counselors who can come in. So that unpredictability sometimes is a question. The length of time that you can never put a timeline on how someone can go through this season can also become another sense of a challenge on how we can work with them. But I think I can also add that when people are going through these situations, there are times I have to be aware of how I am feeling. Because in case it's weighing heavy on me, am I in a space that I can give them the best? And I have to have that awareness of my own journey and how much I can actually be able to manage so I can be present for them. So some of the challenges could be with the person I'm working with and how to help them, and sometimes it's to be aware of what I'm dealing with, and if I can be as best of a help as they need me to be.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that. Something I've recently been thinking about, reading and studying about is sometimes the need to refer.
Yes.
You know, sometimes as counselors we want to manage everything.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about referring out, and what are some situations in like a crisis or a trauma
Yes.
where you might feel you may need to refer to someone else?
Good question. So I will say that number one, there is, I think, a blessing in referring for two reasons right now. One is being conscious of my pastoral ministry and the work I get to do, and sometimes the stretch of what that is. Is it possible that there are times I may not be as present with them as they want me to be? And probably someone who is doing full-time counseling could actually offer something I'm not able to offer. The other times when there are issues that come that I recognize the training level that I have may not be able to help them go deeper to spaces that they need to go. And in that case, that awareness will say, maybe I need to refer you to someone who can be able to support you through this. And so some of that, by the way, also has its limitations. Some people might be very specific on who they want as a counselor. Some may specifically want someone in their own denomination of faith, and that sometimes may not be as many available for them. But it's the journey to try to work with people through that space. But I see referring as actually a blessing when you're noticing either limitations that you have, either time-wise or skill set-wise, that you can refer to someone else. Yeah.
You know, a question that often comes up when people have different schools of thought, like what role does the Bible play in working with an individual through their trauma? What are your thoughts on that? And if you do use the Bible, in what manner do you use that?
Yeah, good question. So I think I will hold the view that most of our psychology actually has its basis in theology, right? So in a way, when we acknowledge about a God who understands the mind and is able to help us through that space, I think that's important. And even seeing Bible characters who go through different things can allow you to see that this is not new to God, even when it feels new to us. But for anybody that I'm working with, there is always what we may call the embedded theology, that which they have been shaped with, that which they have learned from the beginning, things they have picked up in the community, phrases they use from time to time. And in a way, they have some kind of theology. And maybe part of this journey is to see how do we examine that theology together in a way that gives them a better picture of God. Because some, based on what they're dealing with, they feel that God is so distant, He is not good to them. And some of that could come out of maybe feeling I did something wrong before, how could God take care of me in this particular moment? So you don't see in them a sense of feeling God is close. But getting a chance to examine with them, then they don't feel as lonely, that God has deserted them, and that gives them a sense of hope. Trauma and crisis, I will say, practically can be God-sized problems. And so there's a need to have an awareness of God's presence. But also it's meaningful for me anytime I come to meet with members or clients to know I'm not bringing God to them, that God is already here with us. And so part of my journey is to see how God is also working with them and how I can support God in that journey, maybe in their sense of hope or their sense of asking and seeking and the desire to know that there is a God who cares for them, to walk with them in those spaces. And even sometimes to allow them to realize that when they're going through their shock and their struggle, that maybe even if God may not come to them the way they think He should, to be open that God is not limited in how He responds to them. That sometimes I've told friends, it's true that there are times God may heal and provide a miracle, but sometimes God's power is also seen in how He walks with us in the struggle. And that also is a presence of God with us. So my hope is whoever I work with can get a sense of God's presence and the awareness that God is walking with them.
I really like that approach. We've learned the term spiritual bypass.
That's true, right?
Where there's people who would just use the Bible
Yes.
and not deal with the issue.
Yes.
But
yes.
what I'm hearing you say
Yeah.
is that you were dealing with the issue,
Yes.
but recognizing that God is not only present, but
Yeah.
He's always been present.
Correct, that is true. And I think it's part of examining the theology, because you may want to work with someone and actually observe, is their theology helping them or hurting them?
Mm-hmm.
Is their theology helping them to face the crisis or helping them to avoid it, which is the bypass that some people will have.
Mm-hmm.
So helping them to examine it during this journey, which may not be a 1 or 2 sessions, can bring you to a place where you realize they can still see God's presence, even if it's not how they thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say when a crisis happens, people are quickly likely to claim God's power in particular ways, because in that moment of shock and denial, they are really anticipating that God will do something right now.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that may not be exactly how it happens all the time, or most of the time. But to know that over time, as their emotions calm down, they'll be open to hear more about how God can still show His presence in ways other than what they thought was going to be the original way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, thank you for that. Well, a question for you that's
Yes.
more personal in nature.
Sure.
I mean, thinking about the things that you mentioned,
Mhm.
death,
Yes.
infidelity,
Mhm.
sometimes murder,
Yes.
various things.
Yes,
It's heavy.
it is. It is heavy.
How do you deal with that and cope as a
Mhm.
pastoral counselor in
Yeah.
dealing with all of those
Right.
types of issues?
Thank you. So I appreciate that question. I think the first thing is to be self-aware. Am I in a place right now that I can be able to listen to someone in a way that can be meaningful to them? And that self-awareness, I think, can allow me to plan my visitations or contacts with the individuals in ways that can not only be meaningful for them, but hopefully also helpful for me to be able to be present as they need me to be. The second thing that I would say is important is to figure out the times when I'm noticing I do need a break. And there will be periods when I've gone for a while and realized my system is not operating at its optimum, and taking a break will definitely be helpful. The third thing is being conscious of who are the support system that I have.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, being part of a CP group, having a mentor who leads out, provides a good outlet that if I need a sense of conversation, input, perspectives, I can be able to refer and say, hey, just need some perspective, generally speaking, on different things.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even he might point out you may need to be careful about how you're handling this, because it doesn't seem that you are experiencing this in this usual strong way.
Mm-hmm.
So having close mentors like that is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I've also gone through a time in my pastoral ministry when I needed to take time with a counselor
Mm-hmm.
and be able to help process my situations and be able to allow them to pour into me so that I can have a better way to clarify
Mm-hmm.
what's going on in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I will acknowledge, being able to be self-aware, having my own time when I need to take my breaks, being sure I have mentors who can help, and even getting a counselor for myself
Mhm.
is a blessing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, thank you for that. Well, anything that I haven't asked that you'd
Yes.
like to share?
Yeah.
I'm really thinking about, for me as a pastoral counselor, others who will watch this video,
Right.
like what other advice, anything you can share
Yeah.
about someone being in this space?
Yeah, well, I think the only other thing that I'll add to this is to say my observation is we live in a world of hurt.
Yeah.
People are hurting, people are going through different struggles. And I think sometimes I will acknowledge not seeing this as a burden, but as a privilege to be able to walk alongside people
Mhm.
in their time of crisis.
Mhm.
And to actually be aware that we will not be walking alone, that God is with us
Mhm.
through that experience. And we are being given almost a frontline view to not only see the struggle, but also see how God is working
Yeah.
with the people.
Mhm.
And that, I will say, can also be inspirational in its own way.
Mhm.
To have a sense that, wow, this is the person I saw 5 months ago, and see where they are. Or 2 years ago, I thought it was done.
Mhm.
2 years later, that's not where they are. So
Mhm.
it gives me this inspiration that, what, this work is meaningful.
Yeah.
This work is productive, and not only for the person, but even for myself.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, that it's an honor that we get
Yes.
to partake in this
Exactly,
journey.
we are blessed in that way.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Pastor Ellis, thank you so much
Thank you
for this
Crystal. I
time.
appreciate it again.
Yes, this
Thank you
was
so
really
much.
helpful, and looking forward to seeing what God will continue to do through you.
Amen. Praise be to God for that.
Right.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Okay.